The email hit my inbox like a slap to the face, the kind that leaves a sting long after the moment has passed. We regret to inform you that due to unforeseen circumstances, your interview has been canceled. That was it. No explanation, no apology, nothing but cold, dismissive words that instantly made my stomach twist. My hands shook as I read it again, willing the words to change, for it to be some kind of mistake, a glitch, anything but reality. I had spent the last 6 years clawing my way up, sacrificing sleep, relationships, my sanity, all for this opportunity, the kind of position that would set the trajectory of my entire career. I had made it through 5 rounds of grueling interviews, outperformed Ivy League candidates, and impressed the hiring panel enough to land a final meeting with the CEO. It was supposed to be a formality, a handshake, a confirmation that I was everything they had been looking for. Instead, this. I dialed HR, my fingers numb against the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. The woman on the other end answered in that perfectly rehearsed, customer service voice that suddenly felt unbearably fake. "I'm sorry, Ms. Carter, but after receiving the anonymous email about your background, we had to reconsider our decision. The role has been filled." Her tone was clipped, dismissive, as if I were some scandal-ridden liability she couldn't be bothered with. "Wait, what? What email?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "What are you talking about?" There was a pause, hesitation thick in the silence, like she wasn't supposed to say anything more. I really can't disclose that. But I can assure you the decision is final. Please, I whispered, gripping the edge of my desk as if it could keep me from spiraling. I need to know what was said about me. This is my career we're talking about. Another pause. A quiet sigh. Then, in a hushed voice, she said, "The accusations were serious enough for us to rescind the offer immediately." The ground beneath me felt unsteady, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't see. Accusations? What kind of accusations? I really shouldn't be telling you this. She exhaled sharply, then continued, her words coming out in a rushed whisper. The email claimed you falsified reports at your previous job. That you manipulated campaign data to boost your own numbers. That you were caught but let go quietly to avoid a scandal. It also mentioned workplace misconduct. A laugh burst out of me, sharp and bitter. That's ridiculous. None of that is true. Who the hell sent that? It was anonymous, she said, her voice back to its mechanical professionalism. I'm sorry, Ms. Carter. There's nothing else I can do. And just like that, she hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. My entire body trembled as I sat there, staring at my screen, my career, my future, disintegrating before my eyes. An anonymous email. Lies so carefully crafted they sounded just plausible enough to destroy everything I had built. There weren't many people who knew the intricate details of my past jobs. Only someone close to me, someone who had been paying attention, could have done this. And then, like a slap to the face, it hit me. The wording in that email. The phrasing, the structure. It was so familiar, so distinct, because I had seen it before, countless times. In texts. In old essays. In arguments disguised as carefully worded jabs. My sister, Elena. A slow, boiling rage settled in my chest, suffocating the disbelief, the shock, the devastation. It all made sense now. The strange way she reacted when I told her I had made it to the final round. The fake smile, the half-hearted, "That's great, sis," that felt more like an obligation than genuine happiness. The way she had always resented my success, how she had barely concealed her bitterness when I got scholarships while she had to take out loans, when I landed promotions while she struggled to keep a job. It had always been there, bubbling beneath the surface, but I had ignored it. Because she was my sister. Because I had spent my entire life convincing myself that her jealousy was harmless, that deep down, she still wanted the best for me. I grabbed my keys, my heartbeat a violent drum in my chest, and stormed out of my apartment. I barely remembered the drive, my vision tunneling with rage, my foot pressing harder on the gas than it should have. By the time I reached her house, I was shaking with fury. I didn't knock. I pounded on the door so hard it rattled the frame. She opened it, her face morphing from surprise to something else, something guarded. What the hell, Ava? Are you trying to break my door down? I shoved past her, the door slamming behind me. You did this, I hissed, my voice trembling with barely restrained rage. You sent that email. Her expression didn't change immediately, but I saw it. The flicker of something in her eyes. A fraction of a second where her mask slipped. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, I snapped. The email. The one that ruined my job offer. The one full of lies about me. She scoffed, crossing her arms. Wow! So now you're accusing me? Jesus, Ava, maybe they just figured out you're not as perfect as you pretend to be. My hands clenched into fists. It was you. I know it was you. You were the only one who knew all those details. Who else would do something like this? Who else would even care enough to try? She rolled her eyes, but I saw the tension in her jaw. Oh, please. You're so full of yourself. Not everything is about you, you know. A bitter laugh escaped me. Oh, really? Then explain why you looked guilty as hell the second I walked through the door. She opened her mouth, then closed it. A flicker of hesitation. A crack in her armor. And in that moment, I knew. She had done it. She had sabotaged me. And she wasn't even sorry. The rage inside me solidified into something sharper, colder. If she thought she could get away with this, if she thought I was just going to roll over and let her win, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Elena. And I swear to God, you're going to regret it. Elena didn't even try to deny it. She stood there, arms crossed, her mouth pressed into a thin line, the kind of expression that said she was more annoyed at being caught than guilty for what she had done. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating, until she finally exhaled through her nose and rolled her eyes like I was some child throwing a tantrum over spilled juice. You're being dramatic, she muttered, turning away as if the conversation was already over, as if what she had done wasn't enough to completely destroy everything I had worked for. I followed her into the living room, my hands shaking as I struggled to contain the sheer rage clawing its way up my throat. I'm being dramatic? My voice came out lower than I expected, steadier than I felt. You sabotaged my job, Elena. You deliberately sent an email full of lies to ruin my career, and you're standing here acting like I'm overreacting. She flopped onto the couch, grabbed the remote, and turned on the TV like this was just another night for her, like she wasn't the reason I had spent the last few hours feeling like my entire life had collapsed in on itself. I didn't ruin anything, she said without looking at me, flipping through channels at a lazy pace. If they dropped you over an anonymous email, maybe you weren't as impressive as you thought. My vision blurred at the sheer audacity of her words, at the casual cruelty she wielded so effortlessly. So you admit it. She finally turned her head to look at me, one eyebrow raised like I was some nuisance she had to deal with instead of her own sister, the person she had known since childhood, the person she had destroyed without a second thought. I never said I did anything, she said with a smirk, tilting her head, her voice dripping with fake innocence. But hypothetically, if I had, why would I? What possible reason would I have to waste my time on something like that? Something inside me snapped at how easily she toyed with me, at how she was still pretending like this was all some misunderstanding. Because you've always hated that I was better than you. The smirk disappeared, just for a second, just long enough for me to know I had struck a nerve. She clenched the remote in her hand, her fingers tightening around it like she wanted to throw it at me. Don't flatter yourself, she spat, her voice colder than before. I stepped closer, unwilling to let her off the hook, unwilling to let her rewrite reality just because it was convenient for her. You couldn't stand that I got the opportunities you didn't, that I worked for everything while you. She shot up from the couch so fast that I flinched, her face twisting with something ugly, something I hadn't seen in her before, something that made my stomach tighten. Worked for everything, she repeated, her voice rising, cracking with something that almost sounded like disbelief. You think you're better than me because you got your little dream job lined up? Because you got the perfect grades, the perfect career, the perfect life? I scoffed, unable to believe what I was hearing. This has nothing to do with perfection, Elena. This is about you deliberately trying to destroy me for no reason other than your own pettiness." Her laugh was bitter, humorless, sharp enough to cut. "No reason." She took a step forward, eyes locked onto mine, her breath uneven, her entire body trembling now. "You really don't get it, do you?" I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, she kept going, her words tumbling out like she had held them in for too long. "Do you know what it's like to be the one nobody bets on? The one who gets left behind while everyone else moves forward." She gestured wildly, as if trying to paint a picture I was too blind to see. "Mom and Dad never cared when I struggled, but the second you needed something, they moved mountains for you. You were always the golden one, the one they bragged about, the one who made them look good. Me? I was just the screw-up they didn't know what to do with." Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I had always known she was bitter, that she resented me in ways I never fully understood, but I hadn't realized how deep it ran, how much she had let it fester into something this poisonous. "That's not my fault," I said, my voice quieter now, not out of sympathy, not out of regret, but because I was suddenly exhausted. She scoffed, shaking her head like she couldn't believe I was this dense. "Of course it's not your fault. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm sick of watching you win while I'm stuck scraping the bottom of the barrel." I swallowed the lump in my throat, trying to process everything, trying to figure out if there was anything left between us that was worth saving. "So you decided to ruin my life just to even the score?" Her jaw tightened. "I did what I had to do." I stared at her, waiting, hoping for something: guilt, regret, even a flicker of hesitation, but all I saw was justification, a quiet certainty that what she had done was, in her mind, completely reasonable. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I had spent my whole life trying to maintain some sort of relationship with Elena, trying to ignore the little jabs, the passive-aggressive remarks, the subtle attempts to diminish my accomplishments. But this wasn't just a petty rivalry. This wasn't just resentment. This was someone who had made the conscious decision to take away something that mattered to me, not because she needed it, not because I had done anything to deserve it, but simply because she wanted to see me lose. And if she thought I was just going to let that slide, if she thought I was going to walk away and lick my wounds and let her get away with this, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. "You think you've won?" I said, my voice calm now, steadier than it had been all night. "You think this is over?" She tilted her head, smirking again, but this time there was something uneasy in her eyes. I took a step back, grabbing my keys, already planning my next move. "You just made the worst mistake of your life, Elena. And I promise you, you're going to regret it." I turned on my heel and walked out, slamming the door behind me, my heart pounding, my mind racing with only one thought. If she wanted war, she had just gotten one. I spent the entire drive home gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached, my thoughts a tangled mess of anger, disbelief, and something sharper, something colder that settled deep in my stomach. This wasn't just about Elena sabotaging me. It wasn't just about her trying to ruin my career out of some bitter, long-standing resentment. It was the realization that she had never once hesitated, never once considered what this would do to me. That meant she had done it knowing exactly how much it would hurt. And that was something I couldn't forgive. But anger alone wasn't going to fix this. I needed proof. I needed something solid, something undeniable that would make sure everyone, especially the people who had believed that anonymous email, knew the truth. And more than that, I needed to make sure Elena paid for what she had done. The first step was finding out exactly how she had pulled this off. I knew Elena wasn't smart enough to do something like this without leaving behind some kind of trail. She had always been impulsive, always acted first and thought later, and that would be her downfall. I parked outside my apartment and sat in the car for a long moment, my phone in my lap, my fingers hovering over the screen. I had already called my former employer twice, and both times they had shut me down, unwilling to discuss details with someone they had already written off. But I wasn't done yet. If HR wouldn't talk to me, I needed someone else who would. I scrolled through my contacts, my stomach twisting as I landed on a name I hadn't spoken to in years. Daniel Richards. He had been one of my mentors at my previous job, someone who had always looked out for me, who had pulled me aside when office politics got too messy and reminded me how to play the game. If anyone still had my back, it would be him. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the call button, my heart hammering in my chest as it rang. Ava? His voice came through the line, surprised but not unkind. Wow, it's been a while. What's going on? I swallowed hard, pushing past the hesitation clawing at my throat. Hey, Daniel. Yeah, it has been. Look, I wouldn't be calling unless it was really important. I need your help. There was a pause, then a quiet sigh. All right, tell me what's going on. I explained everything, laying it all out in a rush of words, my voice tight with frustration. I told him about the job offer, about the anonymous email, about how the accusations were completely false. I didn't mention Elena, not yet, because I needed to be sure. When I finally finished, there was another long silence, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. I heard about what happened, he admitted finally, his tone cautious. The rumors spread fast. People were shocked, but when HR said they had solid evidence. They don't, I cut in, my grip tightening on the phone. Because it's all a lie. Daniel, you know me. You know I would never do something like that. Another pause. Then, finally, yeah. I do. Relief flooded through me so fast I almost felt lightheaded. But HR isn't going to listen to you, he continued, his voice firm but not unkind. Once a company makes a decision like this, they don't go back on it. They'd rather sweep it under the rug than admit they made a mistake. Your best bet is proving that email was fabricated. If you can do that, you might not get your job back, but you can at least clear your name. That's exactly what I'm trying to do, I said, already feeling a renewed sense of determination. But I need access to whatever they received. I need to know what was in that email, and if there's anything that could lead back to the person who sent it. Daniel hesitated, and for a second, I thought he was going to refuse. Then, with a quiet exhale, he said, all right. I'll see what I can do. A weight lifted from my chest, but I knew this was only the first step. I thanked him, promised I would owe him one, and hung up. For the first time since I had read that email, I felt something other than rage or despair. I felt purpose. But if I thought Elena would just sit back and wait for me to unravel her mess, I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to a series of texts from our parents, each one more infuriating than the last. Mom, Ava, what is going on? Why did you storm into Elena's house last night? Dad, your sister is very upset. Whatever this is about, you need to stop. Mom again, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this behavior is unacceptable. Call me. I stared at the messages, my jaw tightening. Of course Elena had run straight to them, playing the victim, twisting the story before I even had a chance to defend myself. I should have expected it. This was what she did. She lashed out, and when people fought back, she made herself look like the wounded party. I ignored their messages and focused on the only thing that mattered, getting proof. Daniel called me back later that afternoon, his voice quieter than usual, almost hesitant. Ava, I found something. I sat up straighter, my heart pounding. What is it? I couldn't get access to the original email, but I overheard something in the office. IT flagged it because the sender used a personal email address, but the IP address was linked to a residential Wi-Fi. They didn't trace it any further, but if you had the right tools, you might be able to. My pulse quickened. This was it. A personal email meant it hadn't come from an anonymous third party or a company trying to discredit me. It had come from someone close enough to know details about my past, someone who wanted to hide their identity but hadn't been smart enough to cover their tracks completely. And a residential Wi-Fi? That meant the location could be traced. I didn't need a second guess to know whose it would lead to. I clenched my jaw, my hands gripping the phone as I forced myself to stay calm. Daniel, thank you. This means everything. Be careful, Ava, he warned, his voice serious now. Whoever did this, they really wanted to make sure you didn't get that job. And if they were willing to go that far, they might not stop there. I exhaled slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. I know, I said. But trust me, they're about to realize they made the worst mistake of their life. I ended the call and stared out the window, my mind already racing ahead. Elena had played her hand, and she had thought she had won. But she had underestimated me. She thought she had buried me under the weight of her lies, but she had left a crack in her foundation. And now? Now I was going to tear the whole thing down. I wasn't going to let Elena get away with this, but I needed more than just suspicion. If I confronted her without proof, she would twist it, lie, and somehow make me the bad guy. She had always been good at that. I needed something undeniable, something that would back her into a corner with no way out. The only thing I had was what Daniel told me. HR had flagged the email because it came from a personal account linked to a residential Wi-Fi. That meant whoever sent it had been careless. I didn't have access to their internal investigation, but I knew one thing: Elena wasn't some master hacker. If she had sent that email, there had to be a way to trace it back to her. I spent hours digging through every possible lead. I called my old workplace under the pretense of requesting my termination records, hoping to get a glimpse of any digital evidence tied to my case. As expected, they refused to disclose anything beyond standard HR responses, but I wasn't going to stop there. I pulled up the rejection email I had received and checked the timestamp. It was sent at 10:37 a.m. a Monday. Elena worked from home half the week. I had no doubt she was sitting in my parents' house at that exact moment, typing out a calculated attempt to destroy me. I needed access to our parents' Wi-Fi records. It wasn't exactly something I could just log into remotely, but I knew my dad was useless with technology. He had never changed the default settings on anything in his life, and I knew from past experience that their internet provider had a standard account portal that stored all connected activity. I drove straight to their house, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight. I wasn't making the same mistake as last time. I wasn't going to storm in without a plan. I needed to play this right. When I arrived, my mom was in the kitchen, setting the table for dinner. She looked up, surprised, but I forced a smile, keeping my voice casual. "Hey, Mom. I was in the area. Figured I'd stop by." She hesitated for a moment, like she wasn't sure if I was telling the truth, but she eventually nodded. "Your dad's in the living room. We're about to eat if you want to stay." I made a beeline for the living room before she could ask any questions. My dad was sitting in his usual chair, flipping through the channels, barely glancing up as I walked in. "Hey, kiddo," he muttered, not looking away from the screen. "Hey, Dad. You still having trouble with the Wi-Fi?" It was a gamble, but I knew he complained about technology constantly. He groaned, rubbing his forehead. "Oh, don't get me started. The internet's been slow as hell lately. I swear something's eating up all the bandwidth, but I can't figure it out." I forced a chuckle, shaking my head like it was just another one of his usual rants. "You know, you can check the router logs to see what devices are connected. It'll show you if anything weird is using up data." He made a face. "Yeah, like I know how to do that." "Bingo. Here, let me help," I said, keeping my tone light, reaching for his laptop on the coffee table. "I can log in and check for you." He didn't even hesitate before handing it over. I opened the browser, pulled up the provider's login page, and when it prompted for credentials, I took a shot in the dark. My dad reused passwords like it was a religion. I typed in the one I remembered from years ago, his old football jersey number followed by password 123. It worked. I clicked into the network history, scanning the list of recent connections. There it was. The morning my job offer had been pulled, someone had sent an email from this house. The source? A laptop with a device name that I recognized immediately. Elena's. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. This was it. Proof. Concrete, undeniable proof that she had been the one behind everything. I wasn't sure how long I sat there, but when I finally looked up, my dad was staring at me with a confused expression. "Did you find whatever's slowing it down?" he asked. I closed the laptop, standing up. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "But it's not the Wi-Fi you need to worry about." I turned and walked toward the dining room, my footsteps heavy against the hardwood floor. Elena was already at the table, laughing at something Mom had said, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. I didn't give her the chance to enjoy the moment. I slammed the laptop down in front of her, making her jump. She blinked up at me, her smile faltering. What the hell is your problem? I folded my arms. Check the network history. She glanced at the screen, then back at me, feigning confusion. Why would I care about? Because it shows exactly when and where the email was sent from. I cut in, my voice cold. From this house. From your laptop. You lied, Elena. And now I have proof. For the first time, she didn't have a quick comeback. Her face went pale, her eyes darting to Mom and Dad, who were both looking between us in confusion. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the desperate search for an excuse, a way out, but there wasn't one. Not this time. Mom's voice was hesitant. Ava, what's going on? I kept my eyes locked on Elena. Tell them. She didn't speak. Tell them, I repeated, louder this time, the anger creeping back into my voice. Tell them how you sabotaged my job. How you sent a fake email full of lies just to ruin my chances. Tell them why you did it. Silence. Dad looked at her, his brow furrowed. Elena? What is she talking about? Her hands clenched into fists on the table. I could see it now, the realization that she was trapped, that no excuse would be good enough, that she had finally backed herself into a corner she couldn't escape. She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. You just what? I snapped. You just wanted to ruin my life because you couldn't handle me succeeding? Because you've spent years resenting me for things that weren't my fault. She looked down at her lap, refusing to meet my eyes. Mom gasped, covering her mouth. Elena, please tell me that's not true. I waited, but there was no denial, no argument, no attempt to shift blame. Just silence. That was all I needed. I grabbed the laptop, turning on my heel, my pulse steady now, my mind clearer than it had been in days. Enjoy your dinner, I said, walking toward the door. But don't think for a second this is over. I stepped outside, taking a deep breath of cold night air, letting it fill my lungs. She had taken everything from me, but she had made one mistake. She thought I wouldn't fight back. She was wrong. And now? Now it was my turn. I didn't go straight home. I needed time to think, to let the anger settle into something colder, something useful. Elena had admitted nothing, but her silence had been enough. I had given her a chance to own up to what she did, to explain herself, to at least try to justify why she had gone so far just to take something from me, but she had nothing. She had been caught, and instead of apologizing, instead of showing even a sliver of regret, she had just sat there, too much of a coward to face the consequences of her own actions. That wasn't good enough for me. I wasn't just going to walk away and let her move on with her life like she hadn't just destroyed something I had spent years working for. She thought this was over, but it wasn't. I parked a few blocks away from my apartment and sat in my car, staring at my phone. The email she had sent had already ruined my reputation at that company, and there was nothing I could do to fix that. Even if she sent a retraction, even if she confessed, no one would take the risk of hiring someone with an accusation like that attached to their name. People believed what they wanted to believe, and companies cared more about protecting themselves than giving someone the benefit of the doubt. My career had taken a hit that wouldn't be easy to recover from, but that didn't mean I was just going to sit back and accept it. Elena had taken something from me, so now I was going to take something from her. The next morning, I called her workplace. I didn't make up any lies, didn't try to fabricate some elaborate revenge plan. I didn't need to. I told them the truth. I told them how Elena had sent a fraudulent email to my employer to sabotage me, how I had proof that it was done from her laptop, how she had tried to destroy someone's career out of nothing but jealousy and spite. I told them I wasn't looking for anything in return, but I thought they should know what kind of person they had working for them. The woman on the other end of the line listened in silence, then asked me to send over the proof. I forwarded the screenshots of the Wi-Fi records, the timestamps, everything that tied Elena directly to what had happened, and then I hung up. I didn't need to wait to find out what would happen next. Companies didn't like employees who brought unnecessary problems into the workplace, especially ones that involved deception and professional sabotage. Elena called me 2 hours later. I let it ring. She called again. I ignored it. Then came the texts. Elena, what the hell did you do? Elena, you're seriously this petty? Elena, answer me, Ava. I stared at my screen, my pulse steady, my mind calm. Elena, they fired me. Are you happy now? I read the message twice, then put my phone down. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt done. She called one last time, and this time, I picked up. Her voice was sharp, furious, laced with something that almost sounded like desperation. You had no right to do that. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice even. And you had no right to do what you did. Actions have consequences, Elena. Maybe next time, you'll think about that before you try to destroy someone's life just because you don't like that they're doing better than you. You ruined me, she spat, her voice shaking. You think I can just walk into another job after getting fired for something like this? You think this won't follow me? I closed my eyes for a brief second, letting her words settle. Funny, I said. That's exactly what I thought when you did this to me. She went silent, but I didn't wait for a response. I hung up. I knew what would come next. The backlash from our parents, the endless guilt-tripping, the accusations that I had gone too far, that I should have just let it go, that I should have been the bigger person. I had been the bigger person my whole life, turning the other cheek every time Elena lashed out, every time she made a snide remark, every time she took something from me just because she could. But not this time. This time, she got exactly what she deserved. The fallout was immediate. My mother called within the hour, her voice sharp with disappointment, with anger, demanding to know how I could do something so cruel to my own sister. I listened without responding, letting her get it out, letting her throw every accusation at me that she could think of. When she was done, when she finally stopped to take a breath, I spoke. She did this to herself, I said simply. She destroyed my future, and I let her. She tried to move on like nothing happened, and I let her. But when she refused to take responsibility, when she refused to even acknowledge what she did, I made sure she faced the consequences. If you think that makes me the villain, then so be it. My mother didn't know what to say to that. She made a noise like she wanted to argue, but nothing came. She ended the call without another word. I didn't hear from Elena again after that. I didn't need to. I knew she was out there, furious, blaming me for everything, refusing to see her own role in how things had turned out. That was fine. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her regret. I had spent too many years caring about what she thought, about what my parents thought, about keeping the peace at the cost of my own dignity. I wasn't doing that anymore. A few weeks later, I got an email from another company I had applied to before everything fell apart. They had heard about what happened, about the accusations, but they had also heard the truth. Someone, Daniel, maybe, or one of the people who had believed in me, had set their record straight. They wanted me to come in for an interview. I stared at the screen for a long time before finally clicking reply. I'd love to come in. When would be a good time?